The sterile white light of the secure warehouse office felt wrong against the backdrop of their gear. Adam leaned against a metal cabinet, loading silenced rounds into a high-caliber rifle. The memory of the Summit Plant inferno was a fresh, hot scar. But the terror no longer bred caution. It bred a cold, calculating addiction to the impossible. The normal world was boring. Charlie, his repaired shoulder aching, double-checked the oxygen tanks and thermal regulators. $500,000 for 24 hours in a quarantine zone? Are we insane, Adam? We're specialized, Charlie, and they're not asking us to fight a ghost, Adam replied, the words flat and professional. They're asking us to retrieve samples from a vampire virus outbreak. It's biohazard retrieval, high stakes. The rules are clear. Stealth first, intervention last. The mission was a Black Ops contract from a shadowy government division. A small, self-contained city, designated Zone Theta, had been sealed off after an airborne virus mutated, turning the population into feral, light-sensitive predators. Curable, they insisted, if they got the original blood strain from the outskirts research lab. They were not going alone. The door hissed open, and their two recruits walked in. Nikoles, a lean, quiet woman in her late 40s, specialized in CARMs and demolitions, a former EOD tech. Tony, a massive, grizzled man in his mid-50s, was pure muscle and heavy weapon expertise. They were veterans of Adam's old network. The rules of engagement are clear, Tony, Adam stated, locking eyes with the older man. These are infected civilians, not monsters. Use the tranquilizer darts and the suppressed rounds only if they corner you. No unnecessary kills. We retrieve the sample and signal extraction by 0800 hours. Tony nodded, strapping a suppressed battle rifle to his back. I understand. Sleeping bags are reserved for bears, not people. The truck dropped them 3 kilometers from the main city barrier. At 8 p.m. precisely, they breached the perimeter wall, a massive, silent hole cut by Nikoles' thermal charges. The air inside the quarantine zone was cold, stagnant, and overwhelmingly tasted of stale blood and decay. The isolation was total, the silence profound. Adam raised his hand, signaling a halt. He pulled down the face covering of his helmet. Listen, the wind is dead. They hunt by sound. Nikoles brought her sensor up. And smell, Adam. The air composition is saturated with human pheromones and old drying blood. We move like ghosts. Tony, you take point with the suppressed, I'll watch the comms. They moved into the outskirts, a landscape of abandoned cars and dark, empty residential streets. The hunt was on, and they were walking into the predator's domain. The team moved silently through the abandoned residential blocks, their suppressed footsteps muffled by years of accumulated dust and debris. Time was the critical factor. Every minute spent on foot was a minute lost to the approaching dawn. Lab is 3 clicks straight ahead, Nikoles whispered over the comms. We need to shave time. Adam spotted it. A heavy-duty abandoned delivery truck stalled near a pharmacy. The keys were still in the ignition. Tony, cover us. We're taking the truck, Adam ordered. They scrambled aboard. Adam cranked the ignition. The engine coughed twice, then caught with a deafening metallic roar that tore through the profound silence of Zone Theta. The immediate consequence was catastrophic. The noise, the first loud conventional sound in the sealed zone, acted as a colossal dinner bell. From every window, every alley, and every darkened doorway, the vampires emerged. They poured out of the shadows, hundreds of figures, moving with terrifying, inhuman speed. They were gaunt, pale, and feral, their eyes reflecting the truck's headlights with a predatory glow. The streets instantly filled with the swarm, their high-pitched chittering snarls rising to a sustained, overwhelming chorus of hunger. Drive! Drive! Charlie screamed, frantically bracing himself. Adam slammed the truck into gear, flooring the accelerator. The heavy vehicle lurched forward, but the creatures were faster. They leapt on the hood, onto the roof, their combined weight instantly slowing the vehicle. The sound of their claws scrabbling against the metal was sickeningly loud. There are too many! We're surrounded! Tony yelled from the rear, firing a burst of non-lethal tranquilizer darts at the creatures swarming the back window, but the swarm was endless. The truck became a moving metal coffin. Adam fought the wheel, swerving violently to shake the creatures off, but they held on with terrifying tenacity. He saw the inevitable structural failure of the vehicle. They would be overwhelmed and torn apart before they reached the lab. Abort! Abort! Adam yelled over the engine's roar. We're bailing! Everyone, jump on my count! He spun the wheel hard, deliberately sending the truck crashing sideways into a stack of abandoned shipping pallets. On impact, Adam threw his door open. Now!
They leaped out into the chaotic darkness, Adam, Charlie, Nikoles, and Tony, hitting the ground and scrambling instantly for the relative safety of the dense, overgrown bushes lining the industrial street. The truck, now engineless and abandoned, slammed into a concrete divider, stalling out. The vampires descended instantly, tearing into the vehicle with savage fury, frustrated by the loss of their prey. The team lay pressed into the cold, dense vegetation, silent, heartbeats pounding against the earth. They could hear the frenzied, chittering snarls of the creatures mere yards away, their unnatural senses searching the air. "They smell us, Adam," Nikoles whispered, her voice tight with terror. "The scent is a beacon, we're trapped." They lay motionless for what felt like an hour, the cold, damp earth pressing into their bodies, hearing the terrifying sound of the hunt nearby. Slowly, the frenzied snarls receded. The creatures, drawn by the stronger scent of the abandoned truck, began to disperse. Adam gave the signal. They rose silently, bodies aching, clothes torn. They were miles off course and severely behind schedule. "We lost at least 2 hours," Charlie whispered, checking the suppressed battle rifle. "We have over 150 kilometers to go on foot to reach the lab and the extraction point. We'll never make 0800. Adam pulled out the satellite phone. He bypassed the usual comms and used the priority override code. The high authority answered instantly. "Adam, report," the cold voice demanded. "Asset retrieval delayed. Vehicle compromised. We require a time extension. We need extraction at 1100 hours. Confirmed target acquisition remains possible." The pause was brief. "Extension granted. 1100 hours. Do not fail." The line disconnected. The immediate objective was shelter and rest. Ahead, standing dark and monolithic, was a large abandoned shopping mall. Its entrance was shattered, a chaotic testament to the initial panic. They moved toward it, needing cover before the creatures, drawn back by the lack of fresh scent, returned to their hunting grounds. Inside, the mall was a graveyard of consumerism, looted kiosks, smashed glass and debris stretching into the darkness. The scent of blood was fainter here, masked by stale perfume and plastic. 2 stray vampires, their gaunt forms twitching in the darkness, sensed their presence and began advancing. Nikoles acted instantly. She tossed a spent smoke canister 50 feet down the corridor, the metallic clang echoing violently. The 2 creatures, drawn by the sound, sprinted toward the distraction. As they passed a heavy, overturned service gate, Nikoles used a small preset explosive charge to collapse the gate entirely, sealing the creatures in the far wing. 3 minutes of quiet, Nikoles breathed, strapping her rifle back. They found a concealed spot near an abandoned food court. They rationed nutrient bars and water. Fatigue, heavy and paralyzing, set in instantly. Charlie leaned against a wall, his breathing ragged. Adam was about to close his eyes when he heard it. A sound that shouldn't exist in a structure of this size. It was a high, thin, scraping sound coming from the ceiling tiles directly above them, not structural settling, but a deliberate, persistent movement. "We are not alone," Adam whispered, his eyes wide, recognizing the trap. The creatures hadn't just looted the mall, they had nested. He looked up at the air vents, too small for a human, but perfect for the slender, inhuman forms of the vampires. The scraping intensified, joined by a faint, wet hissing. "We move, now, silent and fast," Adam commanded, adrenaline piercing their exhaustion. They scrambled out of the concealed position, moving with frantic, renewed purpose. They fled the mall through a broken service exit and walked the rest of the night, driven by the knowledge that the creatures were swarming the rafters above the mall, searching for their scent. Exhausted, cold, and running on fumes, they finally reached the dense jungle edge outside the city limits at 7 a.m., just as the first weak light of dawn began to touch the sky. The relative safety of the jungle allowed a few hours of crucial rest. They established a quiet, concealed defensive perimeter. Charlie, Nikoles, and Tony collapsed instantly, succumbing to the profound fatigue of the night's chase. But Adam forced himself to remain vigilant. He sat propped against a moss-covered root, the high-caliber rifle resting across his knees. He pulled a cigar from his case, lit it, and watched the gray pre-dawn light bleed through the heavy foliage. The scent of the cigar smoke, acrid and strong, served as a temporary shield against the creature's heightened sense of smell, a small, defiant act of human presence in a zone optimized for predators.
As the sun fully crested the horizon, bringing the cold comfort of daylight, Adam finally allowed the others to stir. The change in the city's activity was noticeable. The density of the feral creatures was significantly lower outside the lightless urban core,
affirming their decision to walk through the night. They were still severely behind schedule, but they were alive. "We need speed," Tony rasped, stretching his massive shoulders, his voice hoarse. "We have 3 hours until extraction. We can't crawl for another 10 kilometers. "Agreed," Adam confirmed, stomping out the cigar. "We find a vehicle, something fast and heavy." It took them only 20 minutes to find what they needed, a black, heavily armored SUV, abandoned by a high-ranking official during the initial collapse. Nikoles, the EOD tech, efficiently hot-wired the ignition, the engine caught with a powerful, restrained hum. They loaded the gear and pushed the vehicle onto the main deserted ring road leading toward the industrial outskirts. Nikoles took the wheel. She was the most spatially aware under pressure. The mood shifted from exhaustion to tense anticipation. At 12 p.m., the SUV eased around a derelict factory block. The research lab was clearly visible, a bunker-like concrete structure only about 1 kilometer straight ahead. Adam immediately noticed the problem. "Stop the vehicle, now!" Nicole slammed the brakes. Adam raised his binoculars. Outside the lab entrance, clustered in the deep shadows of the loading docks, was a massive, tightly packed horde of vampires, far more than they could possibly fight or stealth around. "We walk the rest of the way," Adam stated, lowering the binoculars, his voice flat. "We circle wide through the industrial complex on foot. We approach from the rear and take minimal gear." Charlie leaned forward, arguing instantly. "Adam, we've got 90 minutes. That's a 3-kilometer detour on foot. We drive to the junction. That's 500 meters closer. We move fast, park the SUV, and sprint the last half-kilometer." "No," Adam insisted, pointing to the horde. "That concentration is lethal. They're guarding something." Nicole sided with Charlie. "The vehicle's engine heat is already masking our scent. Driving closer is the tactical choice. We gain 40 minutes. We need that time, Adam." Adam scanned the area one last time. The potential gain was enormous, but the risk of the creatures hearing them was absolute. He sighed, recognizing the shared desperation. "Fine," Adam conceded, his jaw tight. 500 meters. But if I say stop, you all bail immediately. Nicoles, drive slow. Tony, suppressed cover fire." The SUV crept forward, carrying them directly toward the waiting swarm. Nicoles kept the speed agonizingly slow, trying to glide the heavy vehicle silently toward the 500-meter junction. Adam watched the dense cluster of pale, gaunt figures outside the lab through his side window. The tension was a physical weight in the cab. They crossed the 700-meter mark. Then the unavoidable happened. The subtle change in the engine's pitch, or perhaps a slight shift in the wind, alerted the creatures. The massive horde outside the lab instantly erupted into motion. Their collective chittering snarls tore through the quiet zone. Hundreds of figures detached themselves from the loading dock shadows and charged the SUV with terrifying, inhuman speed. "They hear us! They hear us!" Charlie yelled, his voice strained. "Bail! Bail! Now!" Adam roared. Nicole slammed the brakes. The SUV skidded hard, kicking up gravel. The team didn't wait for the vehicle to stop completely. They threw the doors open and sprinted for the thickest patch of undergrowth bordering the industrial road, abandoning the SUV as a sacrificial lure. They hit the dirt and foliage, scrambling for cover. The creatures, delayed momentarily by the sudden stop, swarmed the hot metal of the SUV with frantic, savage fury, tearing at the windows and tires. But the protection was minimal. The wind shifted, carrying their exertion, their sweat, their panic directly toward the swarm. "They smell us! They smell us!" Nicoles hissed over the comms, shoving her face into the cold dirt. "The pheromones were too close!" The creatures abandoned the vehicle. The chittering snarls immediately focused on the bushes, closing the final distance. The ground vibrated with the silent, terrifying rush of hundreds of feet. "Hold! No kills!" Adam commanded, drawing his heavy utility knife. "Non-lethal only!" The first wave hit the bushes, a terrifying mass of snapping teeth and clawed hands. Tony roared, using the thick-suppressed rifle barrel as a club, slamming the stock against a creature's skeletal jaw. Charlie used a heavy pry bar, fighting desperately, pushing the gaunt forms back. The sheer volume of the swarm was overwhelming. They were pressed, scratched, and bitten through their heavy tactical clothing. A creature bypassed Tony's defense, its fanged mouth tearing toward his throat. The no-kill rule disintegrated in a flash of raw survival instinct. Tony fired.
The suppressed rifle delivered a single, sharp put. The creature shrieked, its body convulsing violently as the round struck its torso, and it collapsed lifelessly into the dirt. The silence of the suppressed shot was profound, but the cost was immediate. The faint metallic scent of fresh blood, coupled with the sound of conflict, acted as a renewed beacon. The movement of the main horde, the hundreds of creatures still heading towards the abandoned truck, instantly changed direction, turning its focus back to the immediate source of conflict. "We have to go! The rule is broken!" Charlie yelled, covering his nose from the overwhelming smell. "Lethal force authorized! We fight to the lab!" Adam shouted,
tossing aside his knife and pulling the suppressed rifle from his back. "Move! Tony, suppressive fire! Nikoles, clear the route!" They erupted from the bushes, trading stealth for speed and survival, firing controlled bursts of suppressed rounds at the oncoming wave of creatures, running directly toward the objective, the lab, 500 meters away. The run was a nightmare of adrenaline and calculated violence. Tony and Nikoles covered the rear, their suppressed rifles popping rhythmically, dropping the fastest pursuers. Adam and Charlie pushed the pace, seeing the bunker-like concrete structure of the research lab loom ahead. The main horde was already closing the distance, their desperate, chittering snarls echoing across the industrial zone. They reached the reinforced steel service door of the lab, Adam quickly punching the access code he had memorized from the brief. The heavy door hissed inward, just as the first wave of feral creatures slammed into the exterior wall. They scrambled inside, and Adam immediately threw the heavy metal security bar across the door, sealing them in. The relief was instantaneous, if brittle. The inside, however, was not empty. The facility was dimly lit by emergency power, revealing long, sterile corridors. A few vampires, pale and gaunt, were shambling down the main hall, having been disturbed by the noise of the entry. "Clear the immediate area! No more kills than necessary," Adam commanded, his voice tight. Charlie and Tony immediately opened fire with tranquilizer darts, dropping one creature instantly. Adam noticed a small decommissioned storage room with a heavy internal lock. He maneuvered quickly, herding 3 remaining creatures into the small room and slamming the heavy door shut, twisting the manual lock. 3 were contained. But 2 others, moving with terrifying speed, lunged from a shadowy cross-section, ignoring the tranquilizers. Their attack was savage and precise. Adam brought his rifle up and fired 2 quick, lethal bursts. The sharp put silenced the threat, the creatures collapsing in lifeless heaps onto the polished floor. The mission rule was irrevocably compromised. "Split up," Adam barked, checking his watch. "Charlie, medicine. Find the quarantine cooler, top floor. Nikoles, secure the comms line. Tony, watch this entrance. I need samples." Adam didn't wait. He knelt beside the 2 dead creatures, pulling out a specialized containment kit. He quickly used a high-grade scalpel to take small skin and tissue samples from the creature's extremities, and then, using a vacuum-sealed vial, he extracted crucial blood samples. The evidence was cold, viscous, and vital. Meanwhile, Charlie, moving with frantic desperation, raced up the main staircase. He found the quarantine cooler in a sterile biocontainment room, locating the small labeled box of medicine, the original synthesized antidote, tucked inside. He grabbed the box and sprinted downstairs. As Charlie reached the ground floor, the entire building began to vibrate violently. The sound of the main horde, numbering in the hundreds, slamming against the reinforced steel door was deafening. The steel bar was groaning, straining against the impossible, sustained pressure. The steel bar across the entrance was visibly bending inward. They had the prize, but they were minutes from being overwhelmed. "Adam, we have the medicine! The door won't hold!" Charlie yelled, clutching the valuable box. "Nikoles, comms, signal extraction! Tony, clear a path to the rear!" Adam roared, emptying his current magazine into the door's weakened frame, hoping the noise would deter the creatures momentarily. The heavy door shrieked one final time as the reinforced steel bolts tore free from the wall. The door burst inward with splintering force, and the main horde flooded the corridor. The sheer volume of gaunt, shrieking bodies was immediate and overwhelming. They were overrun. Tony, moving with the cold clarity of a man accepting his fate, didn't rely on his rifle. He ripped a high-explosive fragmentation grenade from his belt. "Get down! Go! I'm buying you time!" Tony yelled, his eyes meeting Adam's at a grim farewell. He pulled the pin and tossed the grenade deep into the thickest mass of the charging swarm. The explosion was deafening, concussive, and blindingly bright, tearing apart the front section of the horde. Shrapnel ripped through the corridor, sending chunks of concrete and shredded vampire bodies flying. But the blast radius was unforgiving. Tony, who hadn't managed to find complete cover, was caught by the concussive force and shrapnel. He was slammed backward against the wall, a deep, sickening gash opening instantly across his chest and shoulder. He slumped down, his rifle falling uselessly to the floor, his breathing shallow and rapid. "Tony's down!" Nikoles screamed, rushing forward to grab her fallen comrade. Adam didn't hesitate. He poured the last of his suppressive fire into the doorway, keeping the surviving, stunned creatures at bay. "Charlie, get the medicine to the extraction point! Nikoles, grab Tony! We're retreating!" The situation was foobarred. They had lost their tactical advantage and were bleeding heavily. Adam raced to Nikoles' side. Together they hauled Tony's heavy, wounded body toward the rear service corridor. "Bullets running low!" Charlie yelled, emptying his own magazine into a tight cluster of creatures that had flanked them from a side office. "We have to go dark!" Adam hit the priority button on the comms unit strapped to his belt. High authority! Target acquisition confirmed. Requesting emergency extraction. Position Alpha 7, industrial outskirts. We are Fubard. Repeat, Fubard. Need birds on the deck in 10 minutes. They reached the rear service door, a simple metal fire exit. Adam used a small shaped charge from Nikoles' pack to briefly weld the door shut from the inside, buying them maybe 3 minutes. They burst out of the lab and into the desolate industrial yard. They had the sample and the medicine, but they were exhausted, severely wounded, and the jungle was waiting. They had achieved the objective, but at a catastrophic cost. They reached the rear service door, a simple metal fire exit. Adam used a small shaped charge from Nikoles' pack to briefly weld the door shut from the inside, buying them maybe 3 minutes. They burst out of the lab and into the desolate industrial yard. The 3 minutes of silence vanished instantly. The horde, having breached the lab's main entrance, were already pouring into the industrial yard, drawn to the scent of fresh blood and exposed prey. Their chittering snarls filled the air. Suddenly, the night sky was torn apart by the rhythmic, percussive sound of rotors. Above them, a heavy-duty military rescue helicopter appeared, descending rapidly. Soldiers leaned out of the side bays, providing immediate heavy cover fire with automatic weapons, their tracers stitching bright lines of suppression into the ground around the desperate team. "They're here! Go! Go!" Adam yelled over the engine wash, pointing at the open hatch. Charlie and Nikoles, ignoring their own severe injuries, sprinted toward the hovering chopper. Nikoles scrambled on board first, establishing a foothold. Charlie followed, quickly securing the precious sample kit and the medicine box inside the cabin. Adam turned back to the most critical asset, Tony, who was bleeding heavily and barely conscious. Adam knelt, hauling the massive wounded man onto his shoulder in a fireman's carry. Tony's weight was immense, but Adam's adrenaline-fueled strength held. He staggered to the hatch, pushing Tony's body up and into the waiting arms of the rescue soldiers. He boarded at last. Just as his feet left the skids, the hatch slammed down. The pilot immediately poured power into the engines, attempting a vertical lift to clear the immediate kill zone. It was too late. The enormous mass of the vampire horde reached the extraction point. Hundreds of creatures, ignoring the suppressive fire from the soldiers, leapt onto the helicopter's landing skids and main struts. The high-caliber rounds killed dozens, but the sheer overwhelming weight and number of the creatures were too much. The cabin was rocked violently. The helicopter, fighting against the asymmetrical weight distribution, began to pitch and yaw wildly. The pilot fought the controls, the blades screaming in protest. "They've got the skids! They've got the main gear!" a soldier shouted over the deafening noise. The creatures clung on with terrifying tenacity, their weight throwing the multi-million-dollar machine catastrophically off balance. The helicopter spun out of control, a horrific, chaotic rotation that ripped the air apart. Adam, Charlie, and Nikoles were slammed against the bulkheads, their already injured bodies sustaining new, brutal trauma. The metal groaned, screamed, and finally gave way. With a final devastating metallic screech and a crushing, earth-shaking impact, the heavy rescue helicopter slammed into the ground nearby. The sound of the twisting metal and the dying rotor blades was immense. The silence that followed was thick, ringing, and instantly punctured by the renewed, triumphant screeches of the vampire horde descending upon the wreckage. We are down. The mission is compromised. If you want to know who survives the crash, subscribe and turn on notifications for Part 2.